And the first prize for creative nonfiction goes to Catherine Rahim for Scar Tissue.
Woo!
I just want to ask everyone to bear with me because I had a hard time cutting anything out of my story, but I hope you enjoy it anyway. The 9mm tucked discreetly in his jacket pocket was small, efficient, and loaded, with 6 bullets waiting impatiently for their target, 2 apiece, just in case. He rang the doorbell, flashed a smile at the woman who answered, and invited him in. Less than 15 minutes later, he was on his way to the door. The home was silent, but for the dull sound of 3 metal bullet casings hitting each other as he dropped them into his pocket. Whistling softly, he left the way he came in. I've always wondered what God tastes like. As a child, I attended a Catholic school, which meant going to Mass every Friday for 4 years. I liked it. I liked the ceremony of it, liked its comforting predictability. I liked the procession as white-robed altar boys flanked the solemn-faced priest as they walked to the altar. I liked the priest's steady voice as he asked God to forgive our sins. I liked saying the familiar prayers aloud with the rest of the congregation. I liked the trappings, the rosaries, the delicate Bibles, the stained glass saints casting colors on the floor. And I liked the sensations, the heady scent of incense, the sounds of rustling pages as parishioners slipped through hymnals, the feeling of the wooden banisters rubbed smooth by countless hands trailing over them, the sight of the rafters meeting at a sharp angle above the altar, the beams pointing to the heavens. But I never got to taste. In a school of 600 students, I was one of 2 non-Catholic people, and the other person was my brother. After my classmates had their first communion, I stayed behind, watching them file past me every Friday. I sat alone, breathed the incense-laden air, listened to the priest bless each individual, ran my fingers over the pew in front of me, looked up at the peaked roof leading to God's front door, and I wondered. I haven't seen the inside of that chapel since I left the school in 4th grade. Religion became something I thought about only at bedtime when I whispered my nightly prayer. Please bless Mommy and Daddy and Hassan and Emily and everyone else. She was still in me, the little girl who'd once written in her journal, I love God and Jesus and especially Mary. I still believed. When the news broke, I was almost 12, tucked in bed when the phone rang at 11:09. Late-night calls were forbidden and, my curiosity sparked, I went upstairs to investigate. My family was in the kitchen, the phone pressed to my brother's ear. 6 eyes were glued to the tiny television on the counter. I looked at the screen, then at my family's faces, bewildered, wondering why they were fascinated by footage of police tape outside a suburban home. Before I could ask what was going on, my brother's voice cut like a blade into my thoughts. Oh, holy shit. Jesus, it's his house. It's his goddamn house. Face ashen, he dropped the phone. Tears rolled down my mom's cheeks. My dad's eyes were closed tightly, his jaw clenched. My brother's face was frozen in disbelief. His eyes were wet. I went to him, my 16-year-old brother who hadn't cried in years. I slipped my arm through his and took his hand. He didn't look at me, didn't speak, but his hand tightened on mine. And I stood beside him, his hand holding mine like a lifeline, until both his legs and his defenses caved, and he slid, broken, to the floor. His name was Nick, and he was 16. He and my brother had a falling out a few months previously, but only days earlier they'd fallen back to friendly acquaintances, if not friends. The last conversation they had concerned a concert that weekend, and their vague plans to meet at the show. His parents were friends of mine. When the boys were younger, they played soccer together, coached by my dad. There's still a photo on our wall of the sweaty 10-year-old beaming after a big win. Nick's smile is mischievous, and despite his youth, you could tell he'd grow up to make girls swoon. And he did. As one of my brother's friends, I was contractually obligated to have a crush on him. The few times he sent a smile my way, my prepubescent heart swelled. We'll never know why, on a pretty summer day, a man walked into Nick's home and walked back out, leaving 3 bodies behind. Some people would argue that it was all part of God's plan. I think that's complete crap. A lame excuse to justify poverty and natural disasters and the extermination of whole races of people. A lame excuse to justify why God would allow a 16-year-old to be shot point blank in his own home. In the span of seconds, any verbs connected to Nick's name went from present tense to past. In the span of seconds, he went from a living, breathing adolescent to a body, to a memory. And whatever part of me that once believed was ripped out, the wound left to harden to scar tissue. And I don't wonder what God tastes like anymore. Thank you.